Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte. We're taking a look today at the latest on the Columbus Blue Jackets and Columbus Blue Jackets defenseman, Seth Jones. It seems like they are destined for a divorce here in the coming months, and we'll be taking a look at that in this video. So, according to Aaron Portzline, he gave out a couple of quick hitter quotes, and we'll be looking at that to start this video off. So, the Columbus Blue Jackets are likely to trade defenseman Seth Jones this summer, most likely near the entry draft. Early favorites for Seth Jones appear to be the LA Kings, the Blackhawks, and the Montreal Canadiens, and they will be major players. He also believes that Seth Jones could fetch a bunch of picks and prospects, and Columbus is headed toward another rebuild. And to add to that, he also mentioned that trading Seth Jones would raise some questions about the future of Zach Werenski and Cam Atkinson with their time and tenure in Columbus. So, I remember hearing back a couple of weeks ago, where is this? Here we go. We heard 3 days ago, May 30th, from Elliot Friedman, that Seth Jones has informed the Blue Jackets that he will not be re-signing. It does appear that he is prepared to test the free agency market next year. So that tells you a couple things. So first thing it tells you is he's not looking for a long-term deal with Columbus. Likely he's going to get moved this summer. Now the more scary thing, if I'm going to be honest here, if I'm the Blue Jackets, is the fact that he mentioned he will not be re-signing. It does appear that he is prepared to test the free agency market next year, which means, let's say he goes to Vegas. They don't have any cap space. I'm just throwing it out there. Okay, let's do a little bit more legitimate option. Let's say he goes to the Montreal Canadiens. Them in particular because of their cap space issues. Now his value is going to be lower because unless he does a sign and trade, his value will be lower going into this year because teams feel he is a rental. He looks like a rental, and he has come out and said that he is prepared to test the free agency market, which means no matter where he goes, he is going to test that free agency market. Now, does that guidelines change when he goes to Montreal? Does that guideline change if he goes to the Rangers or the Devils? Wherever he ends up going, does that verdict change on if he wants to test free agency or not? That's going to be part of the equation. So I think it's going to be interesting here to see what happens with Seth Jones. I think plenty of teams will be in on him. Like they mentioned, the Edmonton Oilers, the Chicago Blackhawks, the LA Kings, the Montreal Canadiens all seem like big players. His brother plays in Edmonton, so you would assume Edmonton would be on that list, absolutely, of teams he could go to. Now, you also have to remember he has a 10-team no-trade list. So you have to think about what teams may be on that no-trade list. You would have to think he's going to have to maybe maneuver this a little bit because let's say he doesn't want to go to a non-playoff team, right? So he's going to put the non-playoff teams, and then he could get away with teams maybe he would. Let's say there's a team like Toronto, right? They don't have the cap space to bring in Seth Jones. Like, it's mathematically impossible unless they trade William Nylander or somebody else to bring in a guy like Seth Jones. So Seth Jones could technically say he could leave the Maple Leafs off that 10-team no trade list because more than likely because of salary cap issues, that deal doesn't get done in any legitimate sense. So Seth Jones, even if he doesn't want to play for the Leafs, he could leave them off his 10-team no trade list, well, because they don't have the cap space to get that deal done, or the logistics just aren't there. Meanwhile, you have the Anaheim Ducks or say the New Jersey Devils or a team like that that has more cap space and needs a defenseman. If he really doesn't want to go to Anaheim or New Jersey, he may really want to put them on at the top of that no trade list. And that's something that we're going to see here from Seth Jones. It's hard to figure out a trade partner because he has that 10-team no-trade list. What's going on in his mind? He's from Arlington, Texas. So you wonder, does he want to play in Texas? Would he want to play with the Dallas Stars? That would be an interesting fit there. But again, we're talking about logistics here. Does Dallas seem like a team that could bring in a guy like Seth Jones? That's part of the equation here. What about a team like the Anaheim Ducks or the LA Kings? They're going to have some cap space. The San Jose Sharks, I mean, if they buy out a couple of guys and they get a trade or two done for some of those, those high-end forwards, they could create some cap space for themselves. Hell, what if they made a move with the San Jose Sharks to bring in, like, Luka Couture or a guy like Tomas Hertl? I know it seems like a crazy thought, but could that work? Could that work in any sense? I'm just saying. I'm not saying that's, this is a for done deal. That has to be it. But I'm just throwing it out there. I think that would be the kind of deal that I think the Blue Jackets would ideally get for him is a defenseman for a center. But the chances are pretty slim of that. I just don't think we're going to see that in this trade. It's going to be a lot of draft picks and prospects going the other way to Columbus as they look to restock the cupboard with prospects. And it's a shame. And the thing is, like I mentioned here, or like Aaron Portzline mentioned, there is now some concern about what happens with the domino. What's the domino effect of this? Because the Blue Jackets have a plethora of free agents over the next 2 years. So how does this affect the Blue Jackets moving forward? As a team that now that they've announced Seth Jones will not be returning, well now, what's the thought process going on in the head of a guy like Zach Werenski, his defensive partner? What is he thinking, What is a guy like maybe goaltenders? What's the goaltender carousel thinking between Merzlikins and Korpisalo? This is the stuff that maybe you don't think about right away. The Seth Jones trade here will be a significant impact, have significant impact on the Blue Jackets. So let's take a look here at Cap Friendly. And, okay, so they do have 3 first-round picks. They have their first-round pick, Columbus. They have Toronto and Tampa Bay's first-round picks here in this year's draft. Now, they don't have their second, but they have their third, their fourth. They have 2 fifths, one from New Jersey, their 6th, and their 7th-round picks. So they have plenty of draft picks. So you look at Patrick Laine, restricted free agent this summer. Mikhail Grigorenko, not a huge deal. Alex Texier, that's a little bit of a big deal. Zach Doubt, not a big deal. Mikko Lehtinen, does he return back to Europe? That's something you could look at. Elvis Merzlikins and Jonas Korpisalo each have, at the end of this season, they will have 1 year left on their contracts. So in the summer of 2022, they will be unrestricted free agents. So that's something that the Blue Jackets have to keep in mind. Zach Werenski, also the summer of 2022. Again, something you have to look at. You also have Seth Jones, 2 years left. And who else is here of any significance? You do have Max Domi as well. Jack Roslovic, Eric Johnson, Emil Bemstrom. Those are all guys on contracts that expire next season. So the question is, for the Blue Jackets, how many of those guys do you trade this summer to get the most you can for them? And how many of them do you likely wait till next summer? Or really, the trade deadline during next season to get these guys moved. So the verdict, I would have to say, it's going to be tough. This is going to be a really tough summer for Jarmo Kekalainen. He's got to find a new head coach. That has to be the number one goal. Whether they get Gerard Gallant, or they bring in a guy like Rick Tocchet, or even if they bring in a guy like Bob Hartley, they have to figure out who their next coach is before free agency this summer, because they're going to have some cap space to work with. It's just they can't re-sign any of their guys, and that's been the biggest problem. I mean, you look at their projected cap space. They're going to have almost $26 million in cap space this summer. But the problem is, who are they going to spend it on? Who wants to play in Columbus right now? Because even if you look at it, if they trade Seth Jones, right? If you trade guys like Werenski, you move on from guys like Jack Roslovic at the trade deadline, or Max Domi, or the other goaltender that they decide to keep here, and maybe they don't even want to re-sign. Who sticks around? Who fixes this equation long-term for Columbus? Now, the thing is, next year's free agency draft class looks pretty solid, and the Blue Jackets could fix themselves in free agency, but we've seen teams that build their team around free agency. It doesn't always work, and that's something that they do have to keep in mind. Just to give you a quick briefing on what we could see at next year's free agency class. I'm not even going to look at Seth Jones, but here are some of the names. You look at guys like Chris Letang, PK Subban, Mark Giordano, Johnny Boychuk. We're not going to see that. But there are some bigger names here. Darnell Nurse, Nick Leddy, Colton Parayko, Rasmus Ristolainen, Hampus Lindholm, Morgan Riley, Ryan Pollock, Zach Werenski, Anthony DeAngelo, Calvin DeHaan, John Klingberg, Josh Manson, Justin Schultz, Colin Miller, Connor Murphy, Matthias Ekholm, Will Butcher, Ben Sherratt. There's some pretty big defensemen there. Now, what about the forward side of things? There's a decent amount of pretty good players in that category as well. If we could get a look here. Evgeny Malkin could be available. Claude Giroux, Phil Kessel, Matthew Tkachuk, Marc-Andre Fleury, Joe Pavelski, Patrice Bergeron, Braden Point, Johnny Gaudreau, Alexander Radulov, Philip Forsberg, Alexander Barkov, Brock Besser, Tomas Hertl. Those are some pretty big names. Mika Zibanejad. And some of those names could legitimately be unrestricted free agents. I'm not just throwing those names out there. A lot of those guys will hit the free agency market. We could see a guy like Mika Zibanejad or Ristolainen. Those guys could hit the free agency market. Dare I even say it, Braden Point. Could Braden Point hit the free agency market next summer and maybe look to Columbus? He's already going to have at least one cup under his belt in Tampa Bay. So he's been taking these discounts in Tampa. Maybe he decides, you know what? I want to make some money. And I want to play in Columbus, be the star of the Columbus Blue Jackets, and rewrite the ship. But the question is, does he want to be that guy? Does he want to be that leader in Columbus and fix their issues? Or does he just like making less money but winning Stanley Cups in Tampa Bay? That's really the mentality you have to find for some of these guys. Now, the problem is you run the risk of that mentality coming into your locker room, and now that's the culture of your room. A guy that wants to be the center of attention and wants to be the big guy on the team, making the most money. And sometimes that gets in guys' heads, and they aren't in the best mindset when they get to that team. So that is something that Kekalainen and the next head coach have to figure out. So I think this is going to be really interesting. And I've made all these videos talking about the Blue Jackets, what they could do this summer and this and that. But I really do wonder, what is the future now? Because the future seems to be changing by the day. And I hate to make even another video talking about this because this Seth Jones thing does have a huge impact on this team. I hate to say it, by the end of next season, by next year's draft, summer of 2022, at the draft floor, Columbus will have traded Patrick Laine, both of or one of Elvis Merzlikins and Jonas Korpisalo, one of those two, or potentially both if they don't want to re-sign, Max Domi, Jack Roslovic. Now, Jack Roslovic seems like an outlier to maybe stay because he is from the Ohio area. That could work. But like I said, Max Domi, we're going to see Seth Jones get traded, potentially Zach Werenski. This is going to be interesting here for the Columbus Blue Jackets. We could see all of those guys out of Columbus as soon as next year's draft in summer of 2022. And Jarmo Kekalainen, I don't think anybody envies his job right now. But like I said, with draft capital, they could find a way to get some of these guys in. But the problem is, teams have made it very hard in the free agency market. We've seen it's been dominated by the big boys in the free agency market. You look for, perfect example like last summer. Who got the big fish free agent Alex Pietrangelo? No, it wasn't the rebuilding Red Wings or the Anaheim Ducks or the New Jersey Devils. It was the Vegas Golden Knights who barely had enough cap space to bring him in the first place. But again, you have the glitz, the glamour, and the potential to win a Stanley Cup. And that's what guys look for in free agency. Are they going to look to Columbus and say, oh, big market team. Oh, I could win a Stanley Cup there. Oh, look at all the star power that's already there. You'd be lying to yourself if you were to say that. And the problem is, you look at a perfect example. Let's say you make $7 million, right? Between Columbus and New York with the Rangers. And this is the perfect example for Artemi Panarin. Artemi Panarin could have made $10.5, $11 million, whatever he's making, with the Columbus Blue Jackets. But he wouldn't get the sponsorships from Gatorade or Bauer or Reebok, whatever brands. He wouldn't get those opportunities with the Columbus Blue Jackets like he does in New York City. And that's the difference. That $11 million, it's not just about the $11 million. It's the name. Like, Artemi Panarin is now a big name in the NHL. Why? Because he's playing with the New York Rangers. And as an Islander fan, I hate the Rangers, of course. That's the the brotherly rivalry there. But you have to account for these things, and that's something that the Blue Jackets have not been able to figure out. And you can make up for deficits. I mean, we've seen guys. The problem is you see a lot of guys leave Columbus. You don't see a lot of guys come into Columbus, and they just don't have that big it factor. Now, if they were to get in a big head coach or a big top draft pick, maybe they are able to change that trajectory. And I hate to say that's the best way for them to do this. Jarmo Kekalainen is going to have to build through the draft again, and he has to get this winning formula. I would say he has his 3 first-round picks this year. You take your draft picks next year. Whatever draft picks for these guys you trade, you're going to have to flush everything out. And then next summer in free agency, you look to some of those big guys. You look to a Braden Point. You look to a Rasmus Ristolainen. You look even at maybe a goaltender. But the problem is you have to have some potential there. You have to have stability behind the bench. You have to have some stability in management. And you have to have some stability in terms of your players. And if they get a lot of good draft picks here in this year's draft and next, talk about a team now that needs to win this draft lottery, or, this will be out by the time the draft lottery happens. But Columbus, talk about a team that needs that draft lottery. A team in the NHL that needs that, it's the Columbus Blue Jackets right now. So, guys, let me know what you think. In the comment section down below, what do you think the Columbus Blue Jackets should do going into this summer with their Seth Jones situation? Could they trade Zach Werenski? Could they trade both goaltenders? Should they trade Max Domi, Jack Roslovic, Patrick Laine? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL and more videos just like this one, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.